You don't know the power of the dark side.
Welcome to Star Wars Chatter, hosted by ANDOR Van Zark. Now you're listening with power. The information on this podcast is my opinion and some internet research. Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Chatter. I'm ANDOR Van Zark, and this is your safe space to discuss Star Wars and music. And today we're gonna recap, review, and get my thoughts on the latest episode on Star Wars ANDOR, episode 9, No One's Listening. But before, a word from our sponsor.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
Then stop at Star Wars Chatter. If you're a Star Wars fan or like video games, comics, cartoons, manga, anime, and electronic music, Japanese rock, Japanese pop, at www.andorvanzark.com and click on the radio tab to listen to the live feed or the podcast where I have my pre-recorded condensed episodes. Or if you're around Guaynabo, tune in to 91.7 FM to listen live on your car or any radio receiver. And also, check out my music on every major music platform. And tune in at twitch.tv/AndorVanZark to see me play video games and do my live concerts on the weekend. Trust in the Force, no light speeding, and buckle up. Now, you're listening with power. Power to the music, and may the Force be with you. The sponsor of my stream and podcast is DistroKid. If you want 7% off on your first subscription with DistroKid, release your music to the world on every major music platform. Make sure to go to my website, andorvanzark.com, and click on the discount link under the tab of DistroKid. Before we get started with the overview and the recap and the review of the episode 9 of Star Wars ANDOR's Nobody's Listening, let me give a little small overview of things that I want to note out from Star Wars ANDOR. So first, I love the music. The music is extremely good within Star Wars ANDOR. I love how they're making it like dark and gruesome. Nicholas Brittle did an awesome job. I love how some of the songs just feel eerie and dark, but some feel like they came out from a cyberpunk universe. Like Synthwave, for example, on that episode where ANDOR gets sentenced to 6 years in prison. So Nicholas Brittle, an Academy Award nominated and Emmy Award winning composer who's previously worked including the TV series Succession in 2018 till present, Moonlight 2016, and The Big Short 2015, has created a score that's less space shawbuckling, more space spy for the story of Cassian Andor, and it's extremely good, and you can listen to it on Spotify or any major music platform to get yourself, into the sounds of what it is and how it feels without having all the dialogue in between. That way you can dive deeper into the whole spectrum of what it sounds like and how great it is. Now, we can get started with the recap and review of Star Wars ANDOR, Episode 9, Nobody's Listening. Which is really interesting to note out the title, that nobody's listening. Is the Empire really not listening? That's a good question that we all might be wondering ourselves, So I want you all in the question down below here in this podcast on Spotify to answer the question. Is the Empire really listening to everyone around? Especially in Narkina 5. And now, to deep dive into Star Wars ANDOR's Episode 9, let's roll out that spoiler alert. This is a spoiler warning.
Well, I didn't see that coming.
If you don't like spoilers, make sure to tune out.
Please hang up and try again.
But if you know what we're talking about, make sure to leave me a message on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or tuning to my next live show at twitch.tv/AndorVanZark and leave me a message there on the chat. So let's get started and listen at your own risk. Now, starting off here, we gotta note out that in Detramino's world, she's the main character of this story. The Imperial Security Bureau officer is terminating her ways through the witness she needs and has finally reached Bix Kalin, with the help of mad scientist, human experimenting Dr. Gorst. On hand like a toy for her, she's really can't play good cop at all the offerings, and almost as thin as her lips lie, and to not torture her if she simply confesses what she knows. Bix, knowing better, calls Miro out. She wouldn't believe her anyways. Almost too giddy behind the eyes, which goth performance really brings across. Our Imperial girl boss tells Bix she's about to pay the same price as her friends Salman Pak. Miro shares that she knows him better at this point than Bix does. From his sessions with Dr. Gorst, she found out he attended a separatist meeting 2 years ago where he met a woman who said if he was serious about politics, he might want to serve as the liaison for Ferrix. When he got back, he was sent the fractal radio unit Bix was using all that time. Throughout this, she figured out this woman was more interested in Ferrix, a unique commercial position to acquire stolen Imperial equipment. Pak was paid to keep the radio alive, something Bix didn't know. So like a cat playing with her food, Miro wonders why Bix would play a role as business owner with no politic affiliation. Well aware that Miro is just fucking with her, Bix gets one jab in, calling the ISB officer the worst of the worst, and tell her to just get on with it. Miro caps her monologue by summarizing what she intended to get out of Bix. More on Casey and ANDOR, relationship with the buyer, a full account of Imperial parts she passed along, as well as who she got them from, who was bribed, and where they went to. Pak told her Bix had at least 6 face-to-face buys, and so she intends to unfurl the nest of relationships that led to ANDOR and the buyer's meeting. Bix tells her the truth in regards to what she knows of the buyer. He comes, he buys, he leaves, and that is all. And then she replies, "That's boring for Dedra." So she, as Bix she knew, would start the torture. The doctor creepily pipes in that the torture isn't physical, like that somehow makes it better, And it goes on excitedly. She shares the disturbing story of how they discover it. Essentially, when the Empire got hostile, pushed back by a sentient species on an outer rim moon called Dizon Frey, the Dizonites were massacred to make way for an Imperial refueling center. Their deaths were recorded as proof of the mission, and it was discovered that they died. They made a choral agonized pleading noise. They sound drove supervising officers to a sort of madness induced by the traumatic pain it was transmitting, like an empathetic sonic wave of death felt by those who killed them. That's real messed up, y'all, and to make it worse, Big's torture is specifically using the sound of Dizonites' children's dying. That is not good at all, I would not like to be listening to that by any means, So as Bix gets the headphones helmet device put on her, Dedra teases that repeating listening causes the most damage. And I could, kind of portray this in many ways and actually say that is kind of true, because I'm a music producer and an audio producer in so many shapes and forms, and listening to the same sound sometimes drives me a little crazy and just kind of gets me into this mental state that I just forget what I'm doing, and sometimes I might want to stop the sound and just move on and then come back to it a little bit later. So later on, Bix is immediately agonized and screaming. By the end of it, she's sweating and puffed eyes, but kept alive because she knows how to identify axes. Pax, however, is to be hanged as an example. So back in prison, ANDOR has been proving his craftiness with his team to make sure they don't get fried, and showing kindness by picking up slack for the eldest in their group. In other words, for Olaf, who is so close to release, as they work Andor takes a quick potty break, and we get to see him chip away at a metal piece hidden behind a slat. Even in space, we can't escape a Shawshank reference, you know? When he returns, a new prisoner is lowered through an elevator platform and tortured with a stick. A sight that gives Andor reason to wonder how many guards there are on each floor. At the Senate, Mon Mothma stands with those in opposition to the Emperor's Imperial's overreach. She sees it as an all too predictable march towards complete unchallenged authority, and affirms their duty is to protect to the peoples first, and the second to protect power of the chamber. And she met with boos. Truly surprising, nothing was thrown at her. So the episode's big twist, which one second thought we should have been see it coming, you know? So it's that Mon's cousin, who suddenly arrives at her embassy's home, is none other than Vel, the rebel just as Cinta said, retreats at her high-class life to clean up like the rebellions in a festival she can take a break from, which is not to mean she's not fully in it, as her function requires her to blend in. She tells Mon that her travels have been worth it as her cousin expresses apprehension over her and disappearances. But Vel assures her the rebellion comes first. Mon admits she thinks they're in over their heads, but Vel holds her steadfast, reminding her that they took a vow. Now moving back to Narkina 5, the prisoners continue to communicate through sign language from afar. Andor tries to interpret it as resistance to being locked up, and Kino says to not talk about escaping. Andor in desperation voices that no one in power cares what they say. You know, as the title of the episode says, nobody's listening. But are they really listening? You know? Like I said, answer the question down below. So let me know if the Imperial really listening to the civilians, the prisoners, and anyone in between, you know? So they just show up to lock in and turn on the electrified floors to keep everyone in line. They only care about the numbers, not the people themselves. So, they're cheaper than droids and easier to replace. They don't care to listen. They're there to put in minimal effort and pick up the bodies if they drop. So Dedra continues to be the hero of her story as she updates Partagaz that she got all the intel she wanted from the good doctor's session with Bix. Everything but one thing, the identity of the buyer known as Axis. Interesting to note that this episode contains a hair of Luthen's wig, but his presence was felt as the reason why everyone is being put through the ringer. Dedra figures Axis runs a tight ship, as well as one large enough to not rely on one network or supplier. At least Bix gave up list of every piece of gear that came through Ferrix, and they think they have a match to a targeting unit recovered from a saved house operated by Rebel Cell associated with Maya Pei, who was called a Neo-Republican in last week's episode. She also knows Andor returned to Ferrix 3 nights after Aldhani with money in his pocket, nothing he had saved. That connects him to what they know about the Aldhani rebels, and 2 soldiers from garrisons identified them as clean-shaven, so that's how they get their physical appearance to be noted out. So Partagaz asks about Andor's mothers, but Dedra explains she's too old and fragile to bring in for questioning, and better suited as bait. In starting turns of events, the prisoners continue to feel restless as new travelers from the other levels of the incident that seem to sweep down and rattle everyone. As the lines communicate, they realize that 2 levels were completely wiped out without a warning. Andor reminds Kino that the guards don't care and they're not getting out. Kino begins to crack, tell him to shut up and keep his head down. With some impressive eyes acting between Serkis and Luna, you get that Kino is getting what Andor is putting down. So the delight that is Eddie returns with another keeping up with the Karn's breakfast moment. She's truly the Kris Jenner of Star Wars universe, and I wish there were more kids for her to boss around because the sheer cruelty in which she regards her son Cyril is too iconic to end once he presumably dies. That is, if he doesn't go off and marry Dedra and eventually father someone like General Hux, which I do think there's a connection there, and that he is really into Dedra. You know, I could see that when he was trying to get his attention and say that I have never seen something like this in the galaxy, you know? So, a fanfic suspicion aside, Eddie notices her body looks good and wonders why, by accusing him that it's clearly not because of the job he's ungrateful for, leading to someone's awkwardness about her digging through his private box. So she tells all but says, "It's another woman, isn't it?" Then we get the most scathing quote in this episode. Eddie calls him the shadows of sun, a tenant, a stranger, with a deepness that cuts through right through the screen. Always in awe of the way Cotton Hunters delivers her lines because we all felt that. In response, Cyril slurps his cereal and tells her he's being promoted. And she smiles, and Eddie changes her tone to pride like nothing happened, and she suddenly is a doting mother. Maybe she perceives that thread of new mommy Dedra in his coldness. Meanwhile, over the family dinner with Mon, Perrin continues his streak of just being the worst. He grills Vel about getting on with finding a husband and says that at this point she should just marry a widower. Things get spicier as he notes that so many Chandorlian folks have suddenly appeared on Coruscant like Tay. And Daddy's girl, Leda, puts her mothers on the spot by calling him Mother's old boyfriend, which Mon deduces she got from her dad. And then she said, well, we were in grade school, so that's how we got our connection. So, moving on, away from Perrin and Leda, Mon tells Val to be spoiled rich girl for a while, and remind everyone that's who she is for her protection. Mon lets her apprehensions show and asks her cousin what have they done, and Val reassures her they've chosen to fight against the dark. And the juxtaposition of that moment to Biggs still being held captive shows that those deeply impacted by the tyranny don't have the luxury Val has, that ability to escape. Even a rebellion deals with intersectional inequalities, showing the disparity between the allies in high places and marginalized on the ground. Back in Dedra's Imperial Goro power arc, she crosses the path of a lovelorn Cyril who has gone full obsessive over her. He tells it wasn't easy to find her. He straight up stood in at the same spot outside her building for days. Dedra's all, I don't have the time for this. But he insists on talking to her for what she's doing. That by being her presence, he realized life was worth living and there was justice and beauty in the galaxy. Whoa, buddy, calm down, you know? Just because you met her and she's doing the same thing as you doesn't mean you have to be all slurpy and derpy about her, you know, as I like to say. So, she pushes him away more and more, the more he's into, with Dedra's penchant for being horny for future, you know? That's what we all think it is. There was a clear tension right there in that point in time, and I quite can't decide if she's into it too, you know, because there was a little bit of a connection there, but I don't know if she's just hiding it by saying I don't have time for this, you know. So, because at any moment it is as if they're about to go all kiss at me at the fountain of the ISB, but it's also plausible she's not about his creepy incel take on John Huggis, a romantic gestures as she threatens to have him arrested and put in cage if he tries it again, you know? Is she just flexing her power over Cyril and edging him? you know? Because that's what it felt. That really intense connection there and that tense there. I was like, come on, just do it already. Just kiss or something. Hug. Smirk at each other. Smile. Because I don't know if she's trying to lead him on or she's really like just saying, I don't have time for this, and being I'm the hard work woman that I'm not going to let any man get in my way of my tasks, you know? That's what I felt, at least. So, in any case, she has a bigger people to fry. Her team has found a rebel pilot using the stolen Imperial masking unit Luthen was selling in the last episode as a destroyer of Stirgard. Oops. Saul was right to pass it on it. Partagaz got intel on the pilot from Anto's Karu squad, and he says there's a raid planned on the power station at Spellhouse. Dedra suggests that they're stage killing the pilot and stage their death on their ship. The Savagery speaks to her horniness, but in space apparently no one has, sex. Still, the tension is laid on thick. Speaking of that kind of tension, Mon and Tay meet up to chat about further donations getting complicated, and yet they don't let things be complicated among them in the way we wish. Let Mon Mothma have some joy and fun. Tay tells her troubles on the horizon for her hefty financial withdrawals, unless she works with Dave Skoldun, a wealthy Chalderland thug who knows she's in their hole. He wants to meet her in Coruscant, likely a trade for a better reputation. So back in Narkina, sadly, Ulevs collapses and MedTech is sent down. The tech insists on not knowing Ulev's name, as Andor and Kino insist he should be saved. He only has 40 shifts left, but the only dignity the tech officer is quick death. After he tells the guards fetch a body bag, the mech tells them no one is getting out now. And with that, Kino finally answers the Andor guard's question. There's never more than 12 on each level. And you know what this is building us for? Yes, a Star Wars prison break. We all know that Andor leaves and then joins the rebellion good and once and for all, because he's on Rogue One, so that's gonna happen anytime soon. And this episode was too much to take in, has a lot of information from the ISB, from Andor, from Mon Mothma and the Rebellion and the Senate. There's so much to dwell in within this, and the music does play a role here, giving us that dark and gruesome, eerie music in the background when Dedra is confronting Bix and whatnot, and the way that they do with the torture headphones, it's just interesting, making sound, especially children dying. The torture scheme is just crazy, I just don't know where we're gonna lead from here in this episode, but I do know we're heading into something really interesting. At least I think it's really interesting the way they're portraying this as of now. But anyways, thank you for listening, and thank you for being here on the Star Wars Chatter, your safe space with good Star Wars and the music. I'm Andrew Van Zark, and now that you're listening to Van Zark, you're now listening with power to the music, and may the Force be with you, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Adios, amigos, roll that outro. This was the Star Wars Chatter, hosted by Andrew Van Zark. If you have any thoughts or any messages that you want to leave me, go check me out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or my website, www.andrewvansart.com, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Sayonara. When you listen to Andrew Van Zark, you listen with power. Now, you're listening with power. Andrew Van Zark. Stream on every major music platform. Power to the music.